The late afternoon sun was pouring through the windows of a small-town diner, casting long golden rays across the worn linoleum floor. Outside, the streets were quiet, the kind of quiet that made you forget how loud life could get. Inside the diner, silverware clinked against ceramic plates, coffee steamed in chipped mugs, and soft chatter floated between tables filled with familiar faces. But that peaceful rhythm was about to change in a way no one expected. A low rumble stirred in the distance, like thunder rolling down from unseen mountains. It wasn't the weather, it was something else, something powerful, mechanical, and unmistakably alive. Within seconds, the sound grew louder, the air humming with the echo of engines. Every customer inside instinctively looked up. Conversations paused, coffee cups froze mid-air. The glass panes trembled just slightly as a group of motorcycles rolled into view, their chrome flashing beneath the sun like armored beasts returning from battle. The engines quieted one by one, and then the door opened. 6 men stepped inside. Their leather vests bore the symbol of the Iron Legacy Riders, a name that carried stories most folks never dared to ask about. Their boots were dusty, their faces weathered, beards thick, eyes sharp, tattoos curling down their arms like maps to a past too heavy to carry aloud. They didn't make a scene, no loud greetings, no bravado. Just the quiet, undeniable presence of men who had seen the rough edges of the world and somehow made peace with them. Still, their arrival changed the air. The waitress, a woman in her 60s who'd seen everything from football teams to wedding brawls, felt her hands tremble as she refilled the sugar jar. No one spoke, but everyone watched. These men didn't come around often, and when they did, stories always followed. The Bipers made their way to the back booth, the one tucked beneath the old Route 66 poster. They sat without a word and ordered lunch in low, gravelly voices. Outside, their bikes cooled in the sun like tired wolves. Inside, tension began to settle, replaced by cautious curiosity. Maybe they were just passing through. Maybe nothing would happen. But then, something did, something no one could have predicted. The soft jingle of the diner's doorbell rang again, but this time it wasn't another biker or a regular customer. It was a little girl.
She couldn't have been more than 7 years old, with dusty pink sneakers and a paper bag clutched tightly in her small hands. Her hair was tied in a loose ponytail that had started to fall apart, and her face wore the kind of innocent calm that didn't belong in such a grown-up world. There was no adult behind her. She had come in alone. The room fell silent again. She took a few steps forward, eyes wide, scanning the room, not searching for food or shelter, but for something she remembered. Her gaze paused at the back booth, where the 6 men sat in leather and silence. Then, without hesitation, she walked toward them. One step at a time, each tap of her shoes echoed louder than the motorcycles outside. The booth seemed to grow larger as she approached, yet she didn't flinch. She didn't pause. She just walked until she stood beside the man at the center of the group. His name was Robert Hale, known by some as Bobby Steele, a nickname that clung to him like the tattoos on his arms. His past wasn't up for discussion, and his future was no one's business. He was the kind of man who carried his regrets with dignity and had long since made peace with silence. Robert looked down, expecting her to turn away or maybe even run. But instead, the girl simply smiled. She lifted her hand and pointed to the tattoo on her forearm, a winged skull wrapped in vines and roses, aged and cracked by years of sun and time. Then she spoke. "Hello, sir," she said, her voice small but steady. "My mom had a tattoo just like that." For a full heartbeat, no one moved. Robert's fork slipped from his hand and clattered against his plate. The rest of the table froze. Even the waitress stopped mid-step. And yet the little girl stood there, calm as the sun outside, staring at the ink on Robert's arm like it was something sacred. Robert blinked, once, Twice. His lips parted, but no words came. The girl didn't seem to notice the weight of the moment. She just kept looking at the tattoo, her eyes not filled with fear, but recognition. She'd seen that design before, on someone who once held her close, on someone she loved.
The room, the day, the very air itself paused around her presence. No one understood why she had come in, not yet, but everyone felt it. Something was happening. Something real. Something more than coincidence. And for Robert Hale, the world he thought had been buried long ago was about to rise back into the light, carried by the voice of a child and the ghost of a tattoo he hadn't thought about in years. Robert's hands didn't move at first. His eyes remained locked on the small finger pointing at his forearm, at the tattoo that had been with him longer than some memories. He felt the air thicken around him, not with fear, but with something deeper. Confusion, recognition, a thread pulling him backward through time. The little girl, still standing beside him, reached into her brown paper bag. Slowly, carefully, she pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was wrinkled at the corners, colored in soft crayon strokes, pinks, blues, and gentle yellows, and she handed it to him like it was the most important thing in the world. He took it without a word. His fingers, calloused from years of handlebars and road dust, trembled slightly as he opened it. There, in the middle of the page, was a drawing of a woman. She had long brown hair, a soft smile, and most notably, the same tattoo drawn across her shoulder, the winged skull with roses curling around it, just like the one he bore. Below the drawing was a name written in a child's blocky handwriting. Mom. The little girl's voice softened, almost as if the paper held a secret she couldn't carry alone. She told me it meant she was brave, she said, but then she got sick, and now she's gone. Those last words didn't echo. They sank, slowly, heavily into Robert's chest, where they settled like stones in a river. The diner fell silent again, but not out of fear this time. The silence was heavier, sadder. Even the usual hum of the refrigerator behind the counter seemed to grow quiet, as if the machines themselves were holding their breath. Robert stared at the drawing. He hadn't seen her in over a decade. Angela Brooks. She used to ride with the club back when they were smaller, tighter, when things were simpler, or at least seemed to be. Angela wasn't just another face in the past. She had been his partner in rides and in life for a while, until she left. No warning, no goodbye. Just disappeared into the world, like too many people do when the weight of the life becomes too much to bear. And now, standing before him, was the answer to a question he hadn't allowed himself to ask. What happened to her? The girl looked up at him, her wide eyes searching his weathered face for something, understanding, familiarity, maybe even comfort. "Do you know what the tattoo means?" she asked quietly. "Mama never got to tell me more." Robert swallowed hard. His throat was dry like he'd swallowed gravel and regret. His hands closed around the paper slowly, not to crumple it, but to hold it tighter, like it might vanish if he let go. He knew exactly what that tattoo meant. It was given, not chosen. In the old days of the Iron Legacy riders, only a few wore it. It marked a trial, a story, a survival. The wings weren't just about flight, they were about loss. The roses weren't about love, they were about memory. Angela had earned it, just like him. And that connection, it wasn't just ink, it was history. He crouched slightly, bringing himself down to the girl's level. His voice cracked a little as he finally spoke. "It means," he said slowly, "your mother was stronger than most people I've ever known, stronger than she probably even realized. And she wasn't alone, not back then, and not now. The girl's eyes glimmered with something that looked like hope, and then, without saying another word, she stepped forward and wrapped her small arms around his neck. It was sudden, it was simple, and it undid him completely. He felt the embrace like a jolt of truth. She didn't know him, not really, but somewhere in her bones she must have felt the echo of someone her mother trusted once, someone who had mattered, someone who had vanished too. Robert closed his eyes and let a tear fall, just one, but it carried more weight than words ever could. Around him, the rest of the bikers watched in silence. They weren't the kind of men who interrupted moments like these. They respected ghosts. They understood grief.
The girl climbed into the booth beside him, like she belonged there all along. She reached for a French fry from his plate, then held up another drawing. "She used to draw with me every night," she said. "She told me stories. Some of them were about riding with people who looked like you." Robert chuckled, barely, like the sound had to push through layers of pain. "Yeah," he said softly, "I bet she did." The two of them sat in silence for a few minutes, surrounded by the low hum of emotion that had replaced the earlier tension in the room. Then, almost like it had been weighing on him from the beginning, Robert leaned in and asked the question he hadn't dared until now. "Where are you staying, Emily?" The girl paused, then looked away. "I don't really have a home anymore," she said. "I just go where I can." That sentence didn't fall flat. It hit like a hammer. Robert's jaw tightened. His heart, which had already been cracked open, split wider. He couldn't ask all the questions: who brought her here, how she'd been surviving, where she slept, but the answer was already clear. She was adrift, like so many children in America who fall through the cracks after losing family. Children who sleep in borrowed beds, foster care, sometimes even worse. According to national data, over 3 million children in the United States have lost a parent. Hundreds of thousands end up in foster care each year, and some, like Emily, simply drift, quietly, invisibly, waiting for someone to notice. Robert noticed. He had missed too much already. Without another word, he stood up. His heavy frame blocked the sunlight pouring through the diner windows. He looked at his brothers, Mike, Ray, Ben, and Tom. No one needed to speak. They had ridden through deserts and storms together. They understood what this was, what it meant. This child wasn't just a memory of someone they once knew. She was family now. Ray gave a slow nod. Mike put his coffee down. Ben folded his arms and leaned back. Tom simply said, "Whatever she needs, we've got her." And that was that. Emily looked up at them, not sure what had just happened, but sensing she was safe. For the first time in what was probably a long time, she let her shoulders drop. She smiled gently, her small hand resting on Robert's arm like it had always belonged there. The storm had passed, but a different kind of journey was about to begin. One not marked by roads or maps, but by something far more powerful. A second chance. The kind not everyone gets. But when it comes, you don't question it. You ride with it. You hold on, and you never let go. That night, something changed in the heart of that little town. It wasn't the usual kind of change that comes with new buildings or fading traditions. It was the kind of change people feel deep in their bones, the kind they talk about over coffee for years to come. As the sun dipped low and the air turned cool, the Iron Legacy riders mounted their bikes once more. But this time, they didn't ride out with the same edge they usually carried. Their pace was slower, more deliberate, their engines softer than thunder, more like the steady beat of something old and reliable, like a promise. On Robert Hale's bike sat a little girl in a borrowed denim jacket, holding on to him with small arms wrapped tightly around his leather vest. Her name was Emily, and as they rolled down Main Street, porch lights flickered on and people stepped out to watch. Some gasped,
Some just stood in silence, because what they were seeing wasn't just a gang of bikers on the move. It was a man, once feared, now changed. It was a girl, once lost, now found. And it was a family being rebuilt, not by blood alone, but by choice. For the next several weeks, Robert's life shifted in ways no one could have predicted. He didn't just find her a place to stay, he made her one. He cleared out the old room at the back of his house that had been used for storing things long forgotten. He painted the walls a soft sky blue, not because she asked, but because he remembered Angela once said it was her favorite color. He picked up small things along the way, a night lamp shaped like a butterfly, a bookshelf that leaned slightly to one side but still held every crayon drawing Emily taped to its surface. It wasn't perfect, but it was home. The two of them settled into a rhythm that was both strange and beautiful. Mornings started with cereal and mismatched mugs of tea. Evenings ended with Emily tucked under a blanket, reading the same stories her mother used to tell. Sometimes she would ask questions about Angela, and Robert would answer carefully, truthfully, letting her know the kind of woman her mother had been. Brave, fierce, loyal, the kind of woman who could ride through storms and still make time to braid her daughter's hair. And Emily, in turn, brought light back into Robert's life, light he hadn't even realized had gone out. She sang off-key, she spilled juice on the floor, she laughed at his old music. But most of all, she reminded him what it meant to be needed, to be seen not just as a man with a past, but as someone who still had something to give. The other riders came by often. Mike helped fix the broken steps on the porch. Ray brought over a stack of books from his own childhood. Ben installed a lock on the front gate, just in case. And Tom taught Emily how to play checkers, which she beat him at more times than she should have. The Iron Legacy riders, once seen as shadows on the edge of town, had become something else entirely. They were protectors, uncles, a strange, patched-up version of a village that raised a child. And through it all, Angela's memory never faded. It lived in Emily's stories. It echoed in the tattoo on Robert's arm. It found new breath in every moment the two of them shared. Because love like that, love tested by time and distance and loss, doesn't disappear. It simply changes form. It lingers in the spaces between words, in the warmth of a hand held too long, in the quiet ride home when nothing needs to be said at all. By the end of that season, something else changed. Not in the town, not in the house, but in Robert himself. He no longer rode like he was running from the past. He rode like a man who had finally come home. If this story found a place in your heart, then take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this are kept alive because of people like you, people who still believe in redemption, in second chances, in the quiet power of doing the right thing, even when no one is watching. And before we end, let me ask you something. Have you ever met someone by chance only to realize they were meant to be part of your life all along? Maybe they showed up in a moment of silence. Maybe they broke through your walls without meaning to. Or maybe, just maybe, they were the missing piece you never knew you needed. Sometimes it only takes a child with pink sneakers and a paper bag of crayons to remind us who we really are.